Hey guys, and welcome to the third episode of the ACFL team breakdowns here. I've got SteelBadker once again, and we're going to be going over the Cleveland Browns today. So for starters, let's hop right into the re-signings. Nothing too huge here, getting Rashad Higgins, Carl Joseph, and Terrence Marshall back on short-term and relatively cheap deals here. But any opinions on these?
I mean, they're fine. It
Yeah.
seems like looking at them, it seems like Higgins and Mitchell got a little bit more money than maybe you'd expect, but they had plenty of cap space going in. I don't think they still used it all, so they're perfectly fine.
Yeah, and I think, these are younger guys, especially with Rashad Higgins. I'm sure they're hoping that he takes up a, bigger step with a certain departure we'll get into in the next slide. So I have this at a B. I think it's fair value, I guess.
Yeah, there's some of these like re-signings, just like, okay, if you don't have to re-sign anybody, how good of a grade can you get? But yeah, sure, a B is fine. Like if they didn't do anything bad, they were all good, so B.
Yeah, besides letting Vernon go, that's the only big one I can think of that they let
But
happen.
he's coming off a huge Achilles injury, so he was already kind of heading towards his, decline, at least declining phase of his career. So you have the Achilles, and it's hard to project him doing better. So
and that takes us into the off-season trades, and they were very, very busy this offseason. My goodness. For starters, big blockbuster trade here with Kareem Hunt going to the Buffalo Bills. Any opinion on this ginormous deal here?
So they shopped Greedy Williams a lot, which I didn't necessarily understand. It was like, okay, he could still be something, but then what they got in return, especially for Hunt, and you get a first rounder and a third rounder for Greedy Williams, that's crazy value based off of kind of where it's at. And then kind of the same thing going down the line, especially for Van Noy. He's a little bit overpaid, but he's for a seventh rounder. And you're getting, they didn't have any linebackers either. It was pretty much a struggle at linebacker. So to be able to get a guy can play that off-ball linebacker spot is pretty solid. And then JPP, kind of similar thing to like what the real life Browns did with bringing in Clowney. It's like we're gonna bring in a solid, stable presence at that edge group, and then hopefully have someone to develop behind him. So I think that's a pretty solid move for them. Again, getting paid quite a bit, but they had all the cap space to burn, so they weren't put in a bad position there. The only of their normal trades I don't like is the Derek Barnett one.
Oh, yeah?
And it's more just because I don't know if he fits well with their team. And like he's kind of more of an edge. And he's kind of not really that 3-4 D end. But he's talented enough to be worth the pick easily. And you have to extend him too is kind of the other awkward thing with that. So if it's if he's going to play rotational edge at 3-4, which he isn't great at, but it's like, okay, you're always going to rush the passer. Yeah, okay. I can see it for a fifth rounder for a team trying to make a push. It was the kind of thing that even if it's not a great fit, it's still worth the trade. So if they're player trades, they're all pretty easily good moves for them.
Yeah, and I would agree with the Barnett, maybe the fit isn't there, but I think just the player itself, if he could stay healthy, he's shown, once or twice he's capable of living up to that first round pick that he was a few years ago. So especially for a fifth round pick, it's a low risk. It is a high price. I think he's getting paid $10 million according to his fifth-year option, I think. So it's inexpensive, but like we've mentioned before, they had the cap to burn. And yeah, well, all the regular trades here, these are players that are going to come in and make immediate impacts and get them over the top here. Moving into the draft trades, they actually made two different trades with the Buccaneers, but I diluted them into one trade, kind of eliminating the redundant pieces. So the trade is pick 30, 59, 90, and 92 for 19 and the Buccaneers' second next year.
Yeah, this is kind of the same thing as some other trades people talk about in the future. It's like, okay, they didn't have a plan. They moved back. They acquired the two first. Then they moved up. And they moved back. So it just felt like they were bouncing around just for the sake of it. But in the end, it worked out. They got the player they wanted. It was just they thought they were being like sneaky and getting more value, but you chalk it up, and this is basically an even trade value-wise. So,
yeah, and I think in this case, especially with that 19th pick, they got really good value there. Moving on to the Jarvis Landry trade, which let me just be honest, this came completely out of left field. They traded Jarvis Landry, pick 26 for Henry Ruggs, pick 48 and 141. And
yeah, so they got the best player in the trade, and then they got a really good linebacker too.
Exactly.
Like,
unbelievable. Oh boy, that was a rough trade for the Raiders, and yeah, they're going to be looking towards Rashard Higgins and Ruggs to kind of break out next year, and add that onto Odell, and they got all that cap back, so that freed them up to kind of make some moves in free agency to kind of strengthen up the team and for the offseason trades. I guess cumulatively, I would have them kind of around. I would say an A minus. I think the Barnett one and the Bucks one you could argue a little bit there, but I just think the Bucks ones they still had fairly good value, especially out of that pick 19, and all the other ones they ran away with. So that's kind of where I got them.
The steals they got in these, they're bordering on A plus. It's like if they just simply don't make the Barnett trade, or if they just make the Bucks trades as just one trade instead of like kind of two, like it's just more efficient that way. Like, because then it just seems like they don't have a plan. But I'm bordering on giving them an A plus. I'll stick with an A, just because they weren't perfect. I guess they didn't quite knock it completely out of the park, but they were getting close. They hit off the top of the wall.
Yeah, I'll concede to that. I think just because of what they got at 19, I'll bump it up to an A as well. I'll take that. Moving into free agency, they weren't outwardly active. They've only got 3 guys here on paper. John Ross, who they got on a 1-year vet, man, he's just going to fill in with that receiving core that's only seemingly getting bigger. Then they got Cheeto Uze for a 2-year, $8 million deal. That was really good price, I think, for him. And then moving us to Dalvin Tomlinson, this is an absurdly good deal. 3 years, $20 million. I do not know how that happened. Fantastic work for the Browns there, unfortunately, for my Bengals.
Yeah, again, they didn't necessarily play very actively in free agency, at least on the higher end. They went for trades on the higher end, which probably could have been seen as smart based off how some of the markets went for maybe some of the players they'd be in on. And Tomlinson being a good deal, even at 320, he's going to be able to play that role that they need in the interior of their D line. Especially they had to cut Richardson, I believe, as their nose last year. Sheldon Richardson, but they had to cut him for cap, which I think part of the Barnett thing is you could have kept a better positional fit and just not made that trade and kept the guy who was overpaid but still valuable. But that kind of plays into just the whole collection of the offseason. But really solid free agency for the most part.
Yeah, and I think Cheeto and Dalvin, I think those are really 2 great bargains at those prices, considering the other corners and kind of the prices they went at. To get Cheeto for only $4 million a year is fantastic work. And Cheeto and Dalvin's just what's going to kind of fill out this defense and kind of bump them up a bit. I've got this at, I know they weren't very active, but I've got this at an A, just because I think Cheeto and Dalvin are that massive amounts of steam.
Yeah, I would agree.
Fair enough. Moving on into the draft, we've got what I think was a really, really, really strong draft. Caleb Farley at 19 falls to them, and I know the injury concerns are there, but I mean his film speaks for itself. I think he had like a 4.2 in the 40 dash or something. Like that's insane.
It was 4.3 something. It was like 4.32.
Wow.
Unofficial.
A guy coming off of a mega injury, and I think this could be a sensational pick in this draft. And then to get Jamin Davis in the 2nd round, both of those for me are A+ picks. Fantastic work there on both. Any opinions on the Farley and Davis ones?
I think they did a good job. I think it would have been tempting to go linebacker first, even though corner is their biggest need. It's like, oh, we just really need a linebacker. We've never had him. But I think that with the linebacker class the way it was, they fell well to take the risk on the elite corner prospect
Mhm.
who could have and maybe should have been a top 10 pick. And
Yeah.
then you still get a linebacker who is in that cluster of second round linebackers that somewhat higher in real life, somewhat lower, but they all were similar level of linebackers just in different ways. So
Mhm.
I think Davis with Kyle Van Noy in the middle kind of gives them like actual coverage and talent there on the inside that they just haven't had.
Mhm.
So knocked out of the park in those first two picks.
And you know what? I'm gonna again, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to say it. With in the fourth round, 110th overall to get Kelvin Joseph. I'm personally pretty high on Kelvin, so I'm gonna give this an A. Value speaks for itself, and they've been really building out their secondary, and they've been able to go best player available with every pick just because they're off season. They filled out at pretty much every position. Just again, fantastic work.
Yep. So for me, like it basically goes like A minus for Joseph,
Mhm.
or not for Davis, and like B plus for Joseph,
Mhm.
just because those players have some more question marks. But I think in the fourth, maybe an A minus. But then Tuilopu there at the end of the round,
Mhm.
that's an A plus. Like
Yeah.
these first four picks together are just about the best case scenario for where they could have been sitting, except for like a crazy fall, like
Mhm.
a JOK in real life falling to them. Like it would have taken that to get any better of a draft for
Yeah.
them. So, in the last two picks, I don't love them.
Mhm.
The late fourth for Sherwood is I don't know if he's going to be a contributor really even, except for a special teams guy. And Grimes from Florida, he could have been part of like Tony and Pitts being there, making him look worse, but I don't necessarily see it. But you're spending late picks on those guys, and they
Yeah.
did so great on everything else that it's like, okay, yeah, you did a great job. So overall, I mean, they get an A. I mean,
Yeah.
they're really killing it this offseason.
Mhm.
I think they
And
took a huge step forward in general this offseason.
yeah, and I think they've kind of quietly been one of the teams that's really risen up, like just in sheer talent. I would agree with the grade of A as well. Moving on to the off-season final grade, just the way they strengthened and just how they did in every facet of this off-season, I really want to give them an A plus. I really do. Uh, they made a few like moves here and there that may have knocked it down, but I think just on a sheer goal for goal basis, it's got to be an A plus for me.
So I'm probably going to go an A again. And
Hmm.
I think they're close to an A plus. If it's for only doing this for 1 year, it's an A plus. But it's JPP isn't going to contribute after this year.
Hmm.
He's expensive. Derek Barnett is going to have to get a bigger extension, and he's not going to be a huge contributor. So you may only getting a year of him, and
Hmm.
so it's just they're getting closer to 1 year out of these guys.
Hmm.
And then the Tomlinson so like, they did great. Like, but the long term cost of the team
Hmm.
has went up. Where they were a team that if they could have afforded to maybe get cheaper at a couple of positions, like especially the D line, like if they could have gotten cheaper but kept it there, like the Tuilopu pick, great.
Yeah.
But then you also have Barnett and Tomlinson, so it's just like it's not quite like perfection, but
Hmm.
like I'm trying to save the A pluses for just like a knock my socks off, like you just really killed it
Yeah.
off season, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. And I think they did kill it. It's just I don't think they completely dominated it. And I don't
Right.
know if I might not give an A plus because I'm trying to be so like selective on it.
Right.
But like so it may be like in a retroactive sense, if I don't give one, they may get it. But for now I'm gonna stay with an A.
Fair enough. I can understand the long term build. Looking at the team statement they gave us, they said that their goal was to build a team for Super Bowl contention while building for the future at the same time. They were also asked what was their favorite signing or transaction that they made. For him, it was easily the Henry Ruggs trade. They were cap strapped with Landry's contract, and being able to send him off for a promising second year receiver is great. I even got the player I would have taken at 29 and 48, which was also great. He was also asked what his favorite draft pick was, and he answered surprisingly with Kelvin Joseph, who he had taken in the second round in real life, and here he got in the fourth round, and thinks he's very talented, athletic, and believes that he'll develop into a great corner. And what's his expectations? To win the Super Bowl this year. And well, let's move on into the projected lineups. I mean, that roster is very, very strong all over the board there on defense and offense. And I think that's why I gave them the A+, simply because I felt that they've built a roster that's capable of fighting with the real big dogs and, the Chiefs, Bills, and maybe they could even give the Buccaneers or Packers a surprise if it ever came to that. Any feelings here on this lineup just on a basis of talent?
So the Super Bowl goal, without seeing big goal, the things that I would think that would hold them back is the secondary. It's improved for sure, but is it improved enough? They were pretty brutal on the back end, and they still. I mean, Delpit would have to be the player that they hoped he could be. We just don't know on Delpit. He was hurt all last year, so it's like, okay, that pick paying off, sure. Ronnie Harrison, we solid. I think that was a good pickup last year. He should be a good safety for them, and then like their corners are going to be pretty solid, and then Denzel Ward could be great, and then Farley could be great. So it's like I think like they're a year away from maybe being stepped up in the secondary like that. But then Baker Mayfield, it's just like, is he going to take the step to being the guy who can lead them there? Because like there's moments where it's like, okay, that's not great. Their offense isn't better than last year, like on paper at least. Like Ruggs over Landry's better, but that's their only upgrade on offense at all. So it's like they're better, but or they still have that Jets game in them where their receivers went down, sure, but Baker fell apart too in a game that defense that wasn't that good. So it's just like it's still there. But then you have games like the Chiefs game that's encouraging. So maybe some growth and Ruggs kind of breaking out to the player he could be. I could see the offense being borderline elite for sure. I mean, the offensive line being elite, the running back, one of the best in the league, receiving core, good. I mean, probably more closer to middle of the pack just because there's a lot of great receivers in the league. But projecting Ruggs to be just slightly better than last year puts them in the top half. And then Baker could be pushing a top 10 quarterback. So the lead defense is kind of a question mark just because there's a little bit of turnover and there's some questionable scheme fit in there. So I think kind of a little bit of that identity thing, but I think their defense is still going to be good. So you have a borderline elite offense and a good defense. That's a pretty good recipe for success.
And I think they're going to have one of the best front sevens in the league. I think just, adding the explosiveness with Pierre-Paul and Garrett and still having, Dalvin and having Tuapu kind of lead the middle, it's going to be really good front seven. I think it's a real boom or bust secondary. Hence why I would knock it down a little bit. I'm angling towards giving the whole defense an 81 or 82 rating. I think I'm going to stick with the 81 just because, with Delpit, Farley, Awuzie, these are guys that have had, maybe either injuries or scheme fit could be questionable. And then looking at offense, I'm confident it'll succeed. I think Ruggs is going to thrive. And I think Rashad Higgins, he'll be a nice solid piece to have. If they can just have a healthy year out of this offensive line, it's pretty comfortably the best offensive line in football. And all Baker's got to do is just, they need a consistent year. They've been kind of on the fringe for a few years, and I've got this offense at 83. I think it just takes a knock because I don't think the receiving score is quite as strong. But ultimately, I think this is going to be hot take. I think this could be a top 5 offense in the league.
Yeah, I feel similar about their offense, but their defense, I disagree. I think they're going to be like 77, 78.
Interesting.
Just because I don't know if Jason Pierre-Paul doesn't take a step back, and Myles Garrett's going to be a beast, but I look at their their front seven, I think is our biggest difference. You think of them as a top 3 unit. I think of them as borderline top 10 at like kind of the high.
Really interesting.
So it just, because I mean, Tomlinson's nice, but there is a reason he only got $20 million. Like,
well, they're not expecting him to. He'll be a nice run stopper, and I think with Garrett and Pierre-Paul, that gives you your pass rush element there, and then you've got Van Noy jamming up the middle.
Last year is kind of what I'm saying. It's like it's the same functional group as last year that wasn't a great defense. So it's like they're better, but I don't think they're not even close to elite on defense. They're good. They're quality starters around the board, but they're going to need, Delpit or Farley to be elite players, and they're going to need either Van Noy to be a true fit in the 3-4 middle linebacker and be better than he was last year, or they're going to need John Davis to be great in year one. And I don't think either of those things are terribly likely. So I agree with their offense being about that 83 pushing top 5 unit if they can put it together. But defensively, I just think they're going to sit closer to the 14-8 range.
So I guess our average out by 81, and I think you're 78. I'll put it at a 79, as the average between the two. But yeah, I think this has to be one of the true contenders for a Super Bowl this year in our league. I mean, this roster is just on paper too stacked. And the only thing I can really see hurt this team is injuries. And they had a lot of them last year. So, if they could just keep it together, it could happen. But as we've seen last year, and you mentioned it yourself, those Jets games, that's still in them. So we're going to see this year how serious the Browns really are. Any more comments on the Cleveland Browns?
Nope.
Then I guess that covers it. Thanks for watching this episode of the off-season coverage. We'll be bringing more episodes to you shortly, and thank you for listening.